having your commitment to work questioned when you have a family, at home when a man won't be questioned about the same thing. Women are being negatively affected by taking maternity leaves, and their career progression gets stalled and they lose out on earning potentials in a lot of different ways.
Right, Lydia. Thank you for doing this. For everybody listening, it is important that they know how special my guest is today. So, identified as an all star for HR by the Automotive News Canada, HR director at a leading tech automotive company, PAVE, HR advisor at Succession HR, keynote speaker at multiple leading HR and automotive platforms, mother, partner, and you find the time to volunteer helping others in their career journeys. Lydia, you are Wonder Woman. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
There is a lot that I need to unpack, and there's so many questions I'm excited to throw your way. So, first things first, talking about the fact that your daughters Maya and Everly are so privileged because they have such a great role model at home. My first question to you is, how do you manage to pack all this into your day? What are your productivity hacks? How are you doing so many things?
I think that one, becoming a parent made me more efficient than I've ever been before, if for nothing else than just out of necessity, because you can't afford to put things off. You got to get things done. And as I've grown in my career and as a person, um, I had to, and becoming a working parent, I had to get comfortable with a couple of things that I wanted to start off with this question, because I think this is important to share. The first one being comfortable with the fact that I cannot do everything all the time, every day. I'm going to do my best, and that has to be good enough. And we talked about this before. I can't let perfection be the enemy of progress. I had the privilege of seeing a woman named Tiffany Dufu speak in person, and I've also read her book. It's called Drop the Ball. So I would highly recommend that to anybody that's interested in figuring out how to do it all and realizing that you actually can't, but how to manage it. She's really good at that. And I'm a natural people pleaser. And so it takes a lot of practice. And to this day, it's still very much a work in progress. But accepting the fact that you can't be everything and do everything all the time, you have to realize that first. The second thing being, especially after becoming a mother, I had to accept that my brain is just not going to retain all of the information that I want it to. So after much resistance, when I started realizing this, I now know that I just need to write everything down. And so I've tried a lot of different methods in how to keep notes, how to keep track of my notes. But currently, the one that's working for me the best is just Microsoft OneNote. You can have different tabs. It's how I keep track of my to-dos. I keep track of notes of my conversations with people that I need to refer back to. Also, I think I haven't done this personally, but in a remote world, we shouldn't be afraid to ask to record an online meeting, so that you can just refer back to it. It's much, much simpler that way. So from a work process standpoint, I think there's some things that you can do to help give yourself more time back, because I think we're often getting stuck with a lot of wasted work and energy that isn't required. And we just get so bogged down in the day to day that we don't think about, hey, should I even be doing these things? So reevaluating every meeting in your calendar, personal, otherwise, making sure that they're necessary. And if they're not necessary, or they could be an email, this sounds like probably like overkill because you probably hear this all the time. Like, this could have been an email, but it's true. Every couple months, I look at my meetings and we'll figure out, is this being productive? Do we need to do it as often? Especially when something starts out, maybe you need to meet a little bit more often, but maybe that kind of fades away and we can give everybody back some time. And I also think you need to reevaluate all the work that you're asked to do that's providing something for somebody else, like reporting, any kind of work products that you're providing to other people. Ask those people, is it meeting the purpose that they wanted it for? Are they using it? Are you emailing it every single week at the same time and it goes off into an email abyss and isn't even looked at? And you could get all of that time back, let alone figuring out, is there better ways to do those things with technology these days? So that's really important to do those things as well, because then you don't need as many productivity hacks when you've made your time as efficient and useful as possible. But it's a really tough balance between work and life, because I actually don't like the word work life balance, because it's more of a work life integration, has been for a number of
Yeah.
years, and is even more so now, post COVID. And so at home, keeping a shared calendar with my partner is the key to keeping us on track. We tried to do it digitally. It just wasn't as easy. It didn't work as well for us. So I literally bought an Amazon calendar that sticks to the wall. Every family member has a different color code. We fill out the calendar at the beginning of the month, and that keeps us on track for everything that's coming up. I don't know what I would do without my $14 Amazon Amazon calendar. It might sound old school, but that's what really works for us.
That was really powerful. And I what stuck with me is the fact that, and it doesn't get spoken about quite a lot, is reevaluate things as we are going. And this is actually something that I want to ask, because people do reevaluate. So what are your goals for 2023, and how are they shaping out?
Yeah, and to continue on that reevaluation, like, as I've gotten older, I've evolved how I set my goals. So it's hard to not feel the, kind of the fresh start of a new year, but it's also very easy to get caught in, like, you have to set goals and you have to stick to them. And that's not true. You can set goals at any time. It does
Yeah.
feel fresh at the beginning of the year because you feel like a
Yeah.
year's wrapped up, especially with the holidays that we celebrate in Canada, wrapping up Christmas and New Year's. It feels like a nice tie to the end of a year. But the way that it's evolved now is that rather than just tangible goals like working towards a promotion or saving this amount of money for a home renovation, and those things are still there, but I've really transformed into working towards doing things that help me design a life that's worth living, professionally and personally. So this year I'm determined to wake up each day and be more intentional. That's my personal buzzword for 2023, intention.
Hmm.
And so I'll sit at my desk every morning. It takes some time to get used to the habit, but I'll sit here and I'll say that word over a few times in my head before I start the day, to remind myself to be more intentional with what I'm accomplishing that day, with when I'm interacting with others, when I'm deciding to help others, when I'm deciding to make decisions that help myself, and when I'm deciding and doing things to set a good example for my daughters. And so I think as a Western society, we need to appreciate more that we are living. You'll appreciate this, in the journey, in the here, we're in
Absolutely.
the now. There
Yeah.
is no final destination. There is a final destination. That's the end of life. Why wait until the final destination to try to accomplish all these things when we should be appreciating what we're in right now? Which kind of relates to goals, because goals are always looking towards the future, and they're nice to have. But
Yeah.
I think deciding how you want to live today is even more important than setting goals.
That's amazing, and it's so refreshing to hear. And I love the perspective that you have on goals, and how there is this bias towards being intentional. And for me, intentional has a slightly different connotation. I've kind of given it action, because the more I think about it, and somebody, I was just talking to someone who's like, how would you even have the confidence to start doing this? I said, I don't know, but I don't want to just keep thinking about what it could have been. And what I'm doing is, if I do something, automatically I'm going to get better. So with time you do get better. And I think action, for me, that's the buzz word for me for 2023. And yeah, I see the connection there. um Thank you for sharing this. And I want to go back in time, and let's begin, since you spoke about the journey, let's go back and start from the beginning, which is that, what was your why? And how did you decide that you wanted to be in HR? Was there any thinking behind that?
I'm hoping this is helpful for others because I had no idea at the beginning. And somebody asked me why HR recently, like in the last couple of weeks. So I have had a lot of time to think about this question. So it's really hard to say how it started, but it's very easy to talk about why I'm still in it. When
Hmm.
I finished high school, I had no idea what I was going to do, signed up for a psychology degree, knew I didn't want to progress in that field and didn't want to go beyond getting the degree. And so one summer, I happened to get a job that was supporting an HR manager at a tool and die company. And she would give me her textbooks and ask me to take notes on the chapters that she had to get ready for her HR classes. And I thought, I'm like, well, this is pretty interesting. It kind of uses the psychology of people and trying to get the best out of them in work among all the administrative stuff. But so I signed up for doing a postgraduate HR certificate. And when I started that program, I didn't even know that there was a such thing as an HR certification. So my imposter syndrome started really young. So you don't have to know what you're doing when you start anything, really. Like you said, like you'll learn as you go, and you do.
Yep.
And I did. And I have had a really great career so far, where I've had the opportunity to work in smaller, medium-sized businesses with small HR teams, which gave me the ability to collect experience across the whole scope of HR. But what keeps me loving this field is a couple of things. One is HR is in all industries. So, although I'm very passionate about automotive and I'm excited to have started at an auto tech company over the last year, I also know that I could go anywhere and create new experiences and learn new industries from scratch, which is really exciting. And the second being, which is a passion that's grown while being in HR, is that I love helping people and helping them become the best versions of themselves, helping them realize their capabilities, helping them overcome challenges. And while it's always been in a professional environment, we know very well that the person that you are outside of work doesn't go away just because you're at work, which means in most cases, I've had the opportunity to affect the personal and professional lives of the people that I get to support. And that's why I don't ever see myself leaving HR or people functions. And it's exciting now that companies are starting to realize that you can take care of your business by taking care of your people. It's not enough companies, in my opinion, but the good thing is that you get to choose where you work and you get to choose to work for companies that share the same values as you.
I
Thank
was
you.
watching one of your keynotes, and this stayed with me. And I'll follow up this statement with a question. But I want to read this out that you mentioned you are invested in developing women within and outside of the automotive industry, building them up, celebrating them, encouraging them to achieve their goals and dreams. You're invested in this not only for your own benefits as a woman in the automotive industry, but for all the incredible women that you work with on a daily basis and future generations. I have been a part of the automotive industry for about 6 years and across two countries. I'm not very proud to say that I've not had this conversation yet with anyone. I do aspire to be a better colleague and hopefully a better leader going forward. And I want to ask if it is appropriate that you could just tell us and people listening, the guys over here, some of the challenges that women are faced with within the automotive industry and in general. I think we need to be more aware for sure.
Well, one, you shouldn't feel bad because it's always a good time to start conversations and learning. And obviously, women need lots of allies. And so, some of these experiences are not that I'm about to share are not just unique to automotive industry, but many male dominated industries. One of the most interesting things that happened to me before leaving Hyundai was we had this internal panel of the field staff, women across the country, across Canada, sharing their stories and what it was like to work in the field. Mostly from a perspective of, hey, let's get other women interested in working in the field. So let's share the stories. But what ended up happening in addition to that was um, the men were starting to hear these experiences of women in the field that they didn't even realize were happening. And one person in particular who's been in automotive for 25 plus years reached out to me and said, I can't believe these things happen to women. And that's at the OEM level. it's in the dealership, but it's even worse for women who work in dealerships day to day. And so, like personally, I have, and I've seen other women experience it, and I've had the unique opportunity, not completely unique. Obviously, other HR people have seen the same thing. But being in HR, you see a lot of the behind the scenes thinking when promotion decisions are being made, when hiring decisions are being made. You hear the conversations of male executives, and they stick with you forever. So having had worked, so I've been in automotive for about 14 years. I've worked 13 or 14 years, worked 17 years total in HR. But things like um, having your commitment to work questioned when you have a family at home, when a man won't be questioned about the same thing. Women are being negatively affected by taking maternity leaves, and their career progression gets stalled, and they lose out on earning potentials in a lot of different ways. I've seen women be treated or talked about differently from colleagues because of how they look. One way or another, either negative talk or positive talk. There never seems to be anything neutral or no talk about it at all. I once had a president way back who only hired women specifically based off of their looks. I used to work in an open concept workplace I was in, and men, so people could look over and see who was coming in and out of the building, and the men would grade women they saw me interview based on what they looked like, and then they would send me an email or a message about who they thought I should hire based off of that. And I was really young back in my career back then and didn't know any better to question it or correct the behavior. Um, I've seen and experienced myself only being able to get your ideas taken seriously when you've been able to convince a male that it's their idea, which then unfortunately you have to give up the credit for. But, and I used to think that this was a good skill to have. Now I realize that that's not a good thing. I need to develop different skills to be able to advocate for myself. But it happened for years, or having to get the buy-in of your male colleagues in order for someone in senior leadership to take your idea seriously, to kind of have that allyship there, or someone else's clout backing it up. I've seen women, treated poorly to their face when they were promoted into a role that was previously filled by a man. I remember one woman saying when she showed up as the replacement that so and so was replaced by a girl, uh, like like it's a bad thing. Um, and it's unfortunate. Sexual harassment is still pretty prevalent in the workplace. In the past workplace, I even reported personal experiences to my own HR leader, and they were brushed off. So I had to leave that place. And just the microaggressions previous to COVID. There's a lot of bad things about COVID, but I think there are so many benefits that came out of COVID. I had a daughter, so that was pretty awesome. But work-wise, we know now that work can be done differently. But previous to that, you had to be sitting in your seat till 6 p.m. to be seen as a productive employee or a good employee. And we all know, and we all have experienced people who it doesn't matter if you're sitting in your seat till 6. That doesn't mean you're productive. I had a few instances myself when I returned after mat leave my first time, and I would arrive to the office very early, between 7 and 7:30. So there was a small group of people that started that early, because we had different people could come in at different times and leave at different times, I was very grateful for that flexibility back then. But the mentality still hadn't shifted. So I was planning every day to try to leave at 4 so I could pick up my daughter. And I never ended up leaving at 4. It was always 4:30, 4:45. Then I'd have to catch the 4:07 to be able to get to her daycare on time. It was always cutting it close because there was just so much work to do. And I remember leaving one day, and I ran into a previous president who's no longer there, and not originally from Canada, but I ran into them at 4:45 when I left, and I got to my car, and I immediately started crying. And because based on my previous experience with this culture and this working culture, they were going to think that I wasn't a hard worker, because they would have, no matter what the explanation was from my past experience, they weren't going to think that I had done a full work day or that I wasn't a good worker. And was this going to affect my future growth potential? Was it going to affect my employment? Because I'd seen that be affected for people before in the past. And I'm so people are, you're probably more surprised to see how grateful people are that COVID actually came, despite the obviously very bad things that that brought. But work wise, so many positive changes. So some of these experiences happened a long time ago, but some of them are very recent. And when I think of what it takes for a woman to be successful, and that being amplified for women of color, and then realizing how many incredible women there are in our industry, it's amazing considering the odds that we're up against, that we have still been able to achieve what we've been able to achieve. And there's still a long way to go.
Uh, all all respect to you, and thank you for sharing this, because there is a lot to process,
And that's just
and
scratching the
uh,
surface.
uh, clearly, and I'll tell you what, while you were telling, you were talking about this, the only thought in my head was that one would imagine that you have a wife, sister, mother, daughter at home, if it
Yeah.
is right. So when it comes to them, we get that they are juggling multiple things, they are busy, they're independent women, and when it comes to co-workers or subordinates, peers, etc., suddenly that filter goes away.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to rationalize that, because
It's
uh, I didn't think about it, because
You could spend so much time trying to rationalize it and the way people act despite having daughters and whatnot at home, and it just won't ever add up.
it clearly
Uh,
doesn't. But thanks for sharing this. And I genuinely mean this. I feel that, definitely there is a conversation that has to be had, which obviously you're having on multiple platforms. We need to be more attentive, and we should be better colleagues in a workspace as well. I think, but all that is asking for too much. I think we should begin by just being better human beings.
and
And
it goes for all others, like for women, for people of color, like all
yeah,
minorities, people from the LGBT community. We can all be better allies, and it starts with. And I know I think you're going to ask a question about it later on too, but we just need to get comfortable being uncomfortable and just
yeah,
realizing and accepting that there's a lot to unlearn and relearn and just do it. And I think that the communities that we're trying to be better allies to recognize that, appreciate it, and it's okay to not be doing it right all the time as long as you're aiming for progress.
absolutely. And staying on that thought, under your stewardship, this is amazing that Hyundai was named best workplace in Canada for women in 2019 and in 2021. Can you talk about some of the initiatives that you rolled out?
Yeah, one thing I think is important to share is that you don't have to know 100% how to make change to just try it. And we talked about that, you starting this podcast. Do you have
Yeah,
to feel 100% about everything, even the title? No, just dive in, just do it because you're going to learn, and you're going to surprise yourself. And I think I had a huge role to play, as many other men and women did in the workplace at Hyundai, in making it a great place to work for women. Back in 2019, I wanted to start the first employee resource group. This one was going to be for women. I had no idea how to start. So I reached out to some groups from other companies, including Hyundai US, who had a group that had been running, gathered some advice and some ideas. Then I gathered an internal team at Hyundai of people who I knew would be champions of the initiative, because I didn't want it to be seen as an HR initiative, which unfortunately means you got to take a back seat in some of those things, and get get your champions to be the face of them, which is perfectly okay if you're moving things in the right direction. And so we got it started, and we didn't know what we were doing the entire time, but we built it as we went, and you just keep iterating and making progress. And from when we started to when I left Hyundai, and now even beyond that, because I get to hear how things are going there, it has evolved hugely. And for a period of time at Hyundai, I was one of the few most senior females there. Since then, they've grown and hired a number of amazing women internally and externally on the leadership team. Um, but back then, that meant that I had a responsibility, especially being in the HR function, to very seriously advocate and protect women in our company. And I took that responsibility very seriously. You can ask my old boss, Kirk, there, just how seriously, sometimes too seriously. But um, our team there intentionally set out and got feedback directly from women on how can we make it better for them? What are we not thinking about? Even when I started, I wasn't a mother when I started. What do mothers need in the workplace? What does everybody else need in the workplace? What do women who are helping take care of children and aging parents at the same time need? We had to collect that feedback so that we could act on it. And that was the important part of it. You have to act on the feedback that you're receiving. Um, so it comes back to just taking care of your people. You can't ask for feedback and then not do anything about it. You have to be prepared to do stuff. And if you're not prepared to do stuff, then you have to understand that you're putting your business at risk. And the second part of your question, the most satisfying part of my job is improving the overall quality of team members' lives. It's why I love HR. It's why I love being part of small, medium organizations, because you get to have that big of an impact there.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. And uh, I read this quote somewhere, and it goes like this: that culture is how employees' hearts and stomachs feel about Monday mornings on a Sunday night. Um, you said that it is the HR function that is you know pivotal to bringing about, setting about these uh, the culture and changes within the organization. And I remember going back and forth with you in this, and I said, is it the HR function that is solely responsible? And you had a very interesting take on that.
Yeah, I think HR is an enabler, a sponsor, but not solely responsible for any change within an organization. Culture is created by the people who are in it. Even individual teams create their own cultures. It's really just how the way things are done. And so I think that HR can recognize when things need tweaking or support or coaching, and you can get the best out of your leaders to help make those changes. I've seen in different organizations the impact that leaders having buy in into the culture that you're trying to create, whether they have it or not, I've seen how that can affect the progress that you're trying to make. Hyundai, Don Romano, the president there, is all in on all of the changes that we were trying to make there. And so it doesn't mean it was a walk in the park, but it was a lot easier having support from the top and having someone who has also been part of the automotive industry for 30 plus years, even though he's only 20 years old. Um, that's, I don't, but he he was a huge pivotal part in um, learning how to change and evolve with the industry and with the times to create a different type of workplace. And I've also seen the opposite, where you can, from an HR's perspective, you can do as much as you can in your own realm and try to influence the people that you can influence. But if it's not embodied and shown as an example from leadership in all other areas, it's not going to take hold of the culture and create the culture that you want.
And in fact, you guys did a such a fantastic job collectively that Hyundai was certified and recognized as one of the top 50 best workplaces in Canada all the way from 2018 to 2022. This is absolutely amazing. Can you shed some light as to what are the criterias for getting selected? So, what are the parameters that these people are judging you on?
Yeah. So the one of the reasons I love the Great Place to Work specifically is because it the to make the best workplaces list, 2/3 of the consideration that their committees take is directly from the feedback from employees on the survey that they administer. And so that's different compared to most of the other employee awards that you see out there because they don't do their own surveys. You can provide survey information from other surveys that you do, but Great Place to Work takes the actual input from the team members very seriously. And the other part of it, they're auditing your culture, so you get to provide a description of all the programs, policies, and those types of things that you've created to support your employees. And so I think that there's too many things to list here, but what we did at Hyundai um, was created a culture of listening. And there was a lot of things that we did with the survey results to create, and beyond that, to create a culture of listening. So we've always took the feedback seriously. We came up with very specific action plans by department because the results were different by department. And we were able to act on those things. It was very easy. We had one piece of feedback was to just hang a full length mirror in the women's washroom. So our facilities manager went to IKEA, picked up a mirror, and it was up in the bathroom the next day. That's a very, very simplified example of feedback. There's obviously a whole gamut of different types of feedback, but it doesn't have to be that complicated to create an environment if you just listen.
It is that is so powerful because I was talking to the director for Motorrad, and he was one of the guests who I've also interviewed on this podcast. And I said, even for hiring, when you're hiring people, so what is that one quality that you're looking for? And he said, active listening is very important and very underrated, because if you're listening actively, a lot of things can be resolved and solved. So
Exactly.
I can connect the dots, and I already, I can see that um, how easy it is when you just are paying attention to things around you. We don't need to complicate or overcomplicate things as we do. We just can keep it short and
And
simple. And
I forgot to mention, like, one of the pillars of the Great Place to Work survey is trust. So building trust, it's a lot easier. Like, if you break trust, it's a lot harder to build it back up than just build it from the get go. And it's not overly complicated to build it with doing what you say you're going to do, listening and acting on it, treating people with respect and dignity. You know, and what that allows a company, if you create it, is we were very lucky to have a lot of success at Hyundai, and they are having continued success to this day. But when you try something out and it doesn't work, or the business is not doing great one month, it doesn't matter. That's not going to affect people, aren't going to all of a sudden leave your company because they trust you and they're in it with you. So it doesn't mean to have a great workplace that your business is successful 100% of the time, or every single initiative you roll out is is accepted 100% and works really well. They will also support you through the lows and, for this sounds a little bit more dramatic than it is, forgive you when you do something not necessarily the right way, as long as you collect the feedback and iterate on it and make it better. And I think that's really important to recognize because it's business is not always easy, but you can still have a very motivated and engaged workplace regardless.
um, perfect segue to my next question, which is about diversity and inclusion. And I'm quite interested in this topic, being an immigrant to Canada myself. Some use this as buzzword, and you're privy to it. A lot of organizations would not want to miss out on what the latest is in terms of the talk track that's going around. But there are only few and true handful of organizations which truly embody and take on in spirit this ideology and roll it out. What I'm keen to learn from you is that how do you gauge whether these initiatives were successful or not at the end?
This one's a tough one because diversity inclusion, um, they're here to stay. They're they aren't buzzwords. So anyone who thinks that it is acting in that capacity will find themselves falling behind if they don't make true and honest um, progression in these areas. And so, and diversity inclusion should have been always at the forefront. And there's a lot of making up to do, because there was a huge focus on it after George Floyd, which happened during COVID, which seemed to really kickstart a lot of change. And it's unfortunate it didn't start before that. But one of the biggest things that's important is all of the unlearning and relearning HR leadership everybody needs to do, especially those that are white, or who are from here like me. My mentality shift over the last 3 years has been huge, and my negligence for awareness before that shift is personally upsetting now that I've done a lot of learning. But I work to be better and more educated at it every day. The metrics around it, I think, are a tough subject, because in the wrong environment setting, driving diversity goals with just metrics can lead to poor decision making that will penalize and isolate groups, no different than it did previously, and in fact, maybe even worse. In the right environment, it will drive the right systemic change required in policies and decision making, recruiting practices, and whatnot. That will lead to meaningful change. So, if we're going to make the changes needed, we need to bring people from all diversity dimensions, including white males, which tend to be like one of the most privileged groups. I could get a lot of flack for saying those words out loud, but I also have a lot of privilege being white as well, and we have to be able to recognize that. Everyone digests it differently, but we need everyone to come along the journey. So we need to make sure that what we're doing in our organizations and personally, when we educate and create training programs and start changing the programs, doesn't start to isolate those groups, because what happens in those cases is people will feel like something's being taken away, when truly what we're trying to do is open the doors for those where they were previously closed. It's not taking away from other people. That's a very, very basic analogy, and it's not intended to minimize the experience of others in any way. It's just a very simple way that I try to rationalize and explain it when I have these conversations. To me, I think it's the most important to focus on recruitment practices. And if you hire interns from schools, ask them what their plans are to increase the diversity of their students. If they don't have a plan and aren't interested in working on one, move to a different school. They'll get the hint pretty quickly, if more people are going to take stances like that, that they need to do better in attracting and more diverse students to their programs. Ensure your job postings are getting viewed by as many diverse candidates as possible. And there are a ton of ways and a ton of organizations that can help do that. And statistics show that if you interview just one female or just one person of color when you're hiring for a position, the chances of them getting hired are still zero. So you need to adjust your recruitment practices accordingly in order to give people from diverse backgrounds a better shot at getting chosen for roles. So increasing the pool by getting in front of more people, but then also interviewing a bigger pool to make sure that they're having a better chance of getting hired on. Tracking that data is really important to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. Then it's equally important, I think, to look internally at your demographics by levels, uncovering barriers, removing them, getting feedback from your diverse team members directly. And those can be very uncomfortable conversations to start, but I think that it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for everybody, because I don't want to speak on behalf of those groups. I'm just speaking based on feedback from situations that I've been in with team members. Sometimes they feel like, why do I have to be the one to tell you what you need to do? But I think over time, what we've realized is this unlearning and relearning, and we need to do it together. We may ask questions in the wrong way. The other side may feel like they don't feel like they want to be the ones to have to provide all the answers, but we got to work together to try to move things forward. And the Great Place to Work survey does a really great job of collecting demographic data, and while still remaining anonymous. So you can track the engagement specifically of different diverse groups and ensure it's in line with that their engagement is in line with the rest of the organization, with those of the other great places to work. And you can use that data to keep working at it. I'm weary of setting goals of let's be 50% gender parity, let's increase this diverse group, because unless you have a whole department focused on it, which some companies do, so they may have a completely different answer than I do, but so I'm speaking from a small organization perspective. They You might lose focus if you start focusing on increasing the representation of one group. You're going to lose focus on other ones because you just don't have the time to do everything.
Because eventually talent and skill set is also a benchmark that you are checking people against, right?
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I get that.
One of the greatest things I think that they created at Hyundai, with the help of the HR team there, I was on maternity leave when it started, so I take absolutely no credit for it. But they created this newcomer to Canada initiative where, it's such an amazing community in Canada, and there's tons of talent in automotive coming from a lot of countries, especially India.
Yeah.
The automotive, like when people think about the automotive markets in Canada and the US, um, and even especially the US, like it's so big. I'm like, do you know how big the market is outside of our own bubble? I'm like, this is nothing. So there's so much talent, and they created this initiative where, through referrals, these newcomers to Canada would have an opportunity to kind of speed interview, not necessarily for particular position, but with a bunch of leaders within Hyundai. And one of the leaders that was part of that initiative has since gone on to VW. But now we have this newcomer to Canada WhatsApp group that's got over 100 people, and we're sharing job postings and we're networking. And there's so much talent to be shared. And I think that the automotive industry is recognizing that. When I first started in automotive, Canadian market experience was so high on the priority list, and now it's laughable. So I'm like, if someone can sell cars in a market that's 100 times bigger than ours, and if they have the aptitude to learn and they love automotive, they will be able to figure it out pretty quickly over here.
Anything in particular that you see that has progressed well, or you want to see it progress more?
Yeah, I think we've come a long way. There's been a ton of evolution. And I think the best part about it all is that we understand work and personal life is integrated, as I talked about before. It's not separate. And most workplaces are now recognizing the whole self, where previously, like check yourself at the door. Don't bring that drama in here. Used to kind of be the old mantra. And now we're like, no, 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 bring your whole self to work. We're here to support all of it, and help you be the best person you can be, with everything about you. Understanding the nuanced differences between people and celebrating those differences. And the CCDI, the Canadian Center for Diversity and Inclusion, we started our initiatives at Hyundai doing unconscious bias training with them, and they had this wonderful woman who delivered our training. And I use the same term these days, is all these dimensions of diversity. And there's so many dimensions of diversity. Some are very obvious, the ones that we know, people who are from different countries, different color, different genders. But even within a group that looks the exact same, they will have different lived experiences that will create different diversity dimensions for them, whether they are a parent or not, or single or not, or their parents are living close or their parents are living far. Even within a senior leadership team that does look the same, they will have different lived experiences that they will bring to the table. And the neurodiversity that we also experience, of all the things that you can't see about people. They talk a lot about how, well, there's more people with ADHD now than ever before, and there's more people with this, and there's more people with that. I don't think that's true. I just think we didn't know what it was before or how to properly diagnose it. And we would automatically deem those people as lazy or unwilling to work hard or not focused, when really they're actually they just experience things differently. And you can get the best out of all people, no matter where they are on any spectrum. And so I think that has been a huge evolution, and I think it will continue to evolve, but has been one of the most exciting ones. people, you don't have to fit people into a cookie cutter anymore. There are still workplaces that do, but a good employee can look a lot of different ways. And I think that mental health support has also had a huge evolution. I never even heard of mental health training. Mental health first aid training, I took it, but I didn't know about it before 5 years ago. You can be certified in mental health training, and it's a very interesting course because you learn how to, especially within HR, how to um, in escalated situations, how to de-escalate them and how to help people through very, very serious situations potentially. And for example, before I had this training, I had dealt with a very serious situation of an employee threatening to commit suicide. And so that was a very interesting experience as an HR leader to try to help that person in the right way. But we didn't have mental health training and mental health first aid back then. I had a similar situation following the first aid training, and I knew exactly what to do. I knew what questions to ask. I knew where to go to get help immediately. I was still able to find solutions in the first instance, but I wasn't as prepared as I was after I'd had that training. And so, more respect for mental health, recognizing that it's an illness just as, having a sickness or an injury is, and needing time off to recharge. It's nice to see that evolution within the workplace. So it's all very
That's
promising.
clearly, and I think it's important as well because you clearly deal with extreme emotions, right? Some of the instances that you spoke about, I have newfound respect for my HR colleagues because, of course, I did not know what all goes behind the scenes, because technically from afar your journey is when you enter the organization, and then you grab a coffee with them every now and then when you're exiting or during the time when you're like, okay, what's happening with the appraisals, etc., how many days am I supposed to come to work? Those are the basic conversations that I'm having. But I mean, I'm really happy to have learned that there is so much happening. But just circling back, that you deal with extreme emotions, that when you're hiring people, they're obviously on top of the world, and then some who are looking forward to joining the company and have not made the cut. It's difficult to say no to people. How do you manage to remain human? Because I know that you're genuinely a nice person, but other than that, how do you manage your own mental health, for that matter, to not let things impact you?
Yeah, there's a couple things, and it's hard because empathy fatigue, um, constantly giving and exercising empathy and compassion and absorbing people's energy, which isn't always positive because it's not like people are coming to HR to thank you every day. It's usually because they're coming because they need help solving a big problem. Or it's a big emotion thing, like, and it's important to them, like their career development. That's a very positive conversation to have, but it's very important to them. So you really have to bring your A game and be really good in those conversations. And so it's still a work in progress. I think HR and leaders, or anyone in the position that has to do these types of things, has to recognize that that will deplete your energy, and you need to figure out, based on your own needs, how to replenish yourself, and resting and refreshing yourself in those ways. You have to make it a conscious effort. I think that years being in HR, you naturally just get better and better at being objective and being able to have these conversations while maintaining that empathy and compassion. And like many things, it just takes practice and a lot of self grace. And so I think that one of the best concepts that I ever came across was radical candor. And there's a book on the subject by Kim Scott. And I'm not a very good reader of full books. I prefer audio books, or I'll go watch the TED Talk. And she's got a TED Talk. So watch the first 15 minutes of it. You can deliver direct feedback from a place of caring. That is the entire precipice of that concept. And so that really took hold of me. I've incorporated it into all my training, into all my coaching, and to in all my interactions with people, either in a professional capacity or in my personal life. It's really made a positive impact because I'm no longer afraid to go into these conversations knowing I have to deliver either a hard message or hard news. Because one, it's either part of my job, if it's part of recruitment, for example, and we had that conversation before, specifically filling a couple of roles. So many great candidates, and you got to let them down. And I've really just embraced that this is part of the job, and I just make it really human. I tell them I don't beat around the bush. I will tell the person right away that they're not being chosen, but let's have a conversation about it. If they're willing. If they're not willing, that's fine. People are, maybe they're protecting their own energy, and that's fine. So if it's a big fat no and they don't want to talk to me ever again, no hard feelings. I wish you all the best always. But I've had some really incredible conversations with people who I've been telling they're not getting the job. And I even mentioned to you before, some of us have even become friends. I'm like, I didn't hire them. And I've
Yeah.
still maintained incredible relationships and have built friendships out of it because it was actually interesting. A few weeks ago, I had to do that in my current company. And the gentleman stopped me and he's like, "Can I just ask you why you do this?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "You didn't have to take a call with me." And I said, "You didn't have to spend 3 hours of your time screening, interviewing with us. And it's the least that I can do is to give you some of my time to have a real conversation." And it's almost sad that I almost feel sad that he was so impressed by that gesture because I just wish it was more common. But it also makes you feel really good when you can start affecting that kind of change on people, because people will never remember you for what you did, but they will remember you for how you feel. After kind of adopting that radical candor concept, it was a very easy switch because even though I'm delivering a tough message, and sometimes it's like, "Hey, you got to get your shit together. Like, what's going on? Tell me what the problem is. Like, why are you feeling this way? What is your thought process? Just lay it on me straight, and we can help work through these things." Um, and they know that I'm doing it because I want to help resolve it and help them reach their goals. It really made a huge difference. And I'm not even afraid to go into those conversations anymore. But I prepare myself, I make notes, I make a list of things that I want to say, and I want to make sure that we cover or a list of questions. So I prepare for the conversations, but I'm no longer afraid of them.
You're intentional about it.
Sorry?
You're
Intentional.
intentional.
Yeah, I'm intentional. See?
Yep.
Everywhere.
So, and it's catching on. I'm absolutely loving this. Thank you so much. And I know I can feel it in my bones. Literally, there's so many nuggets of, you know, actionable insights, such pure, unadulterated information for people to take away. This is amazing. So talking about being intentional, being human, and being prepared, right? This is all that is happening. But on the other side of things, we have AI, which is here and it is taking over. And I want to talk about AI, Chat GPT, how it is going to evolve the entire hiring process. You already know it because we share passion for technology and information here, that Chat GPT reached 1 million users in 5 days, the fastest anybody has reached that kind of number. It can write emails, cover letters, resumes, LinkedIn emails, business plans, blogs, content. And ChatGPT passed a Google coding interview for level 3 engineer with a salary of 183K per year. I will share the link for people who want to read this article. It's here, it's doing things, and it's only going to improve. So pointed questions at you: how do you see Chat GPT and AI powered technology impacting the overall hiring process?
One thing I think that Chat GTP has got a lot of wow factor. And so I think that's why it's making a lot of the news. But AI chatbots, they've been around for a while. We're starting to get into a different level of that. But specifically as it relates to HR and recruitment practices, there has been technology there is technology that's out there and is developing that is already helping with it. But I think this is going to take it to a more advanced level. One, I don't think AI will ever replace humans. I think the not yet anyway. Not in my lifetime. I think that the way to be um, to get the best experience is by combining AI with humans, and you will have the best outcome. But deciding what pieces, I think it's very easy to decide the human pieces, but then figuring out what can be optimized using AI has to be done very carefully and thoughtfully. And that's all a work in progress. And I'm not an expert in it by any means, because AI still, the content that gets input can be biased, which means the content that get output can be biased. So especially when it relates to recruitment, and can it fully take over reviewing um, uh, and making hiring decisions? I don't think so. I think that the as for HR as a whole, it will be able to replace a lot of mundane tasks. I don't want to admit how many times I asked it a question today and it helped me write something here and write something there and give me a chart here, which may have taken me 3 or 4 times as long to create myself. Um, and it's interesting to see how this is going to affect different generations, because we've already had the ability to exercise skills like thinking critically and writing an essay from scratch, writing exams without any help, and just with the work experience that we have. This new generation, holy cow, I'm excited to see how it evolves. But I've already in these this the content that I've been absorbing recently, and one was just last night. I listened to a podcast, and this woman who helps by grading papers has talked a lot with professors, and a lot of them are freaking out because exams are all done digitally online, and so now they're going backwards. They're in person grading paper copies, and so things seem to be regressing backwards in a certain way, but maybe in a good way, because one of the things that I think AI is going to create is, like you mentioned at the beginning, is create. You can write blogs. You can probably write an entire script for a podcast. You can write a script for videos. You even have AI that will make the videos for you, and so that's going to become more recognized. And I don't think people are going to like it. They're like, okay, well, this is just written by AI. I'm not interested in it. And it may force us to move backwards in a way where we value the face to face interaction and one on one or group conversations and group thinking and brainstorming, um, which we've kind of moved away from, where we're relying on technology too much. So it's just interesting to see how that's going to happen. I'm not really sure exactly where it's going to go. Specifically for recruitment, um, there are systems in place that can help grade resumes, because if you're in an organization where you're getting thousands of applicants, that's impossible to be able to go through them all in person. That's why I like working at a small organization. I will get 1 to 200 applicants for a position. And I still value, and maybe this is now I'm like, am I going to be seen as an old school? I like going through the resumes myself, because I'm not sure if you haven't had the time, especially within small organizations where your HR team is the employee relations team and the performance management team and the training and development team and the whatever else. Like, there's just so much that one HR team does, and you can't have a person focused on setting up the proper infrastructure for your recruitment systems to be able to utilize AI in the right way. Because, like I said, if it's bias or garbage in, it's going to be bias and garbage out. So I value looking at the resumes. I looked at 225 resumes for one position over the last week for our open marketing role. And I don't think that could have been done necessarily by AI. I also know that when you enter, we all know sometimes when you're applying for a job, depending on the formatting, unless you know exactly how to format the resume, When you're inputting the job applications and you upload the resume, you're still required to write out your experience because it can't appropriately extract it depending on the format of how you upload it. So I don't think all of that is really reliable unless you're working at, I don't know, a Fortune 500 with 20,000 people that has a team of 100 focused on your HR technology or other technologies. Then you still need to do it the way that it's been done before.
From a applicant standpoint, how are you leveraging that platform? Because like you said, if it is garbage in, then that's garbage out, right? It's definitely speeding up the mundane tasks, and in terms of looking it as a deterrent, one should probably look at it as something that can help you speed up a lot of things.
Yeah, like I love communication, like within an organization, and in most of my roles, I've been like I write the emails, I write the communication from the HR department, sometimes even on behalf of the executives or the president. But it's not an inherent skill of mine. I have to really work at it, even though I love it. So it could take me hours to write a simple email because I'm researching, which also takes me time because I don't do it every day. I'm to make sure that everything I've got in there it checks out, and just wording it the right way, grammar. It all takes extra work for me. And so if I can have ChatGTP create the basis of an email that I just need to go through and proofread to have that human side of it and make sure it makes sense, then I've just saved 3 or 4 hours of my time that I could be putting towards spending with employees one on one or building new programs from scratch that need a bit more attention than a particular email. There's just so like I don't even want to give all my tricks away because if
No.
anyone from my company is going to be like, Lydia doesn't even do her job. But like today, I asked it to put together a competency matrix for a tech sales team. And then bam, an entire chart with competencies, definitions, what they should do by level, like what the expectations are by different levels. And I read through it, and it would need a lot of tweaking to fit our organization. But I already have something to start from rather than a blank page, which takes me a lot more time to get going. Once I'm going, it's good, but you got to get there first. And so, for example, I got to create a performance management process from scratch. And I've had them at all the companies I've worked at. They've all been slightly different. So I'm trying to use my experience to find the best way to go forward. And I have spent years because no one has ever seemed to figure out, no company, no country, no industry has seemed to figure out what's the magic sauce for great performance management systems or processes. So I'm like, I could go to all these articles and read them, but if I just ask ChatGTP, what's the ideal performance management process? And it's going to pull all that together and spit it out. And so I did that today too. I'm like, I want to know what it has to say. And it really reaffirmed a lot of the stuff that I already think and I already know. But that gave me a new level of confidence that I didn't have to spend 10 business days taking an hour each day to try to catch up on some articles to see what's the new thing, what are they saying. And I know the data from ChatGPT is only up to 2021, of course, and I know that's
Yeah.
going to change, and there's other versions that are more connected to recent data. But it's just exciting to see that that's where we're headed. And I can collect I don't have to spend all that time on these tasks that can be replaced, that can now be repurposed and focused on, in my case, people. Marketing. I'm so interested to see how this is going to affect
It's going to change
marketing.
the landscape.
Yeah, it's
Content
exciting.
creation is so easy.
And anyone can do it.
Yep.
It, it I don't know. I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say. It's going to be an exciting ride. I know a lot of people are afraid of AI. I don't think there's a need to be afraid. Not in my lifetime. I don't think there's any Terminator stuff going to be happening. I hope. Oh my goodness. I love sci-fi. So imagine that in 5 years from now and the next pandemic, and then this file is found, and then they're laughing because Lydia said that was never going to happen, and then it did. I just imagine it. Anyway.
Okay, these are questions that I understand. You know, we're all still navigating through Chat GPT, AI, understanding this entire landscape. So there is no right or wrong answers. I'm just going to throw some questions at you. Let's hear your perspective on that. That do you think Chat GPT has the potential to increase diversity and inclusivity in the hiring process? If so, how?
No, not now. I think that not necessarily reliably, because the like I mentioned before, the information that is in the AI systems to be able to spit out the responses or the actions, you have to be 1,000% confident that it's not bias.
Right.
And without having those systems perfected, or at least I don't have confidence in them being perfected, I will not have 100% confidence in that making those decisions for me. I want to make those decisions.
Perfect. Do you see AI influencing the way companies attract and retain talent in
I
the
think
future?
so, which I mentioned before. I think those have already started. You can really drastically change the applicant experience. And I think companies need to consider that too. We all think about when someone signs an offer, that's when you really start treating someone as an employee, um, or like when they start on their first day. But we need to consider the pre boarding when they accept the offer to the start date. How are you keeping that employee engaged? Because we know a lot of people don't show up on their first day. I have not experienced that personally, but I've heard many stories. But then, even the applicant experience, that is the number one way to start building your employer brand. And like I mentioned, those conversations that I have with people, even though it's beneficial to the individual, it's not lost on me that that's also beneficial to the brand that I'm representing. They're going to remember that this is how I was taken care of, even when I didn't get a job at this company. And so, yeah, let me refer everybody I know to this company. And your applicants that didn't get a job with you, it's obviously going to be a much bigger pool than the ones that you did hire. And you want both on your side. And so, chatbots to answer questions about recruitment processes can be put in place, so that you don't have any questions about anything at all. And you can just chat 24/7, and get the answers that you need, because the HR team has been able to input the answers to all those questions. And of course, it would be escalated to a real person if there was, for some reason, a question that couldn't be answered. So I do think it's going to change the experience.
And in your opinion, what are some of the ethical or privacy concerns around the use of AI technology in the hiring process? Um, and do you think these concerns can be addressed?
I don't know if I know enough about it to confidently answer the question. I'm always concerned about the privacy of information, how information is saved and retained, and who knows what. Like, even interview meetings, I want to be marked as private. It's a small industry. So if you are from a competing brand and you're interviewing at another competing brand, and 10 people know you there, and all of a sudden they see you in someone's calendar, like, there's so much about it. So I think that AI is programmed, so you can program it to do the right things. So I think that we can. I just don't know enough to know how how that would be done, but I'm confident that it can be.
No, that's fair. And thanks for sharing this. As we're evolving with AI, etc., what's also happening is, and I think it's, I won't call it a millennial thing, but yeah, that's where the transition sort of started. And with Gen Z, it's also taking another shape altogether. Um, the balance between, or the disparity between skill and experience, uh, uh, you know, I want to sort of connect these two dots with degrees. Are degrees still relevant? Like, if I'm an MBA, do I still am I considered to be educated and good enough for a role, or do I just need specific skill set and speciality to get that position? So, you know, skill versus degree, what is the future?
This is one of those questions that's not going to please everybody listening, because there'll be both camps.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's as important as it used to be. And so it's funny because I've had trying to piece this experience together. So, in most of my experiences, they've wanted to put this is you need to have this degree or something similar, this years of experience. I've completely removed those from my job postings now because I just want to see, like, I want everyone that feels they have the skills for this role to apply. Because what I did experience in the past when we did have those on the job postings, the hiring manager never ended up caring. Generally, they would talk like they cared, and I had previous HR managers and leaders of departments that were very snobby about education. But at the end of the day, we were still making sure that we hired people with the right skills, whether it was, even if, like, I've had hired people, and we have a gentleman at Hyundai, he has a geography degree. And he was even working on, I believe, his PhD in that field, and then ended up switching careers. But that's his education, and it has no relevance towards what he's doing with Hyundai today. And he's very successful. So it's just such an interesting experience to have. Like, they're like, no, we have to put the years of experience and degree on the job posting, and then they hire whoever comes our way that's got the right experience anyway. So based on that, I know it's not important, and I want to get as big of pool as I can get. We know that not everybody has access to the financial means, or for other reasons, to post secondary education. Which so if you are an organization that's truly trying to put programs in place that are related to diversity and inclusion, you won't include those on there, and you will take a look at all of the different types of candidates that come your way and recognize the experience that people have over the education. Also, I don't remember a single thing that I did in university. My postgraduate HR certificate was more beneficial in the 8 months than a multiple year degree.
That's actually true because I followed a fairly old school way of approaching my job and education. In India, typically what you do is you finish your school, then you join a college, which is another 3 years, and then after your you know high school diploma or college, then you go do your masters. So that's another 2 years, and after that you go and start working. And it is a bit of a letdown or a shocker, because once you've done your MBA, you're like, okay, I'm finally educated because I've got a master's degree. And then you're sitting with a bunch of invoices and feeding them into the system.
It was a big shock actually joining the workforce, and then you realize that it's way different than what you learned in school. And then even still, when you move from one organization to the other, I thought in my first organization, like, okay, this is how business is done. And then I went to the second organization, and I'm like, oh wait, is this how business is done? And then you realize, no, every business is different, and there's just so many nuances to everything. um, I think you gain specific skills going to school. I learned how to, that's probably where I perfected my procrastination skills and working under pressure. And I'm sorry, I'm just kidding. But like, I did a psychology degree. Do and like, am I good at HR because I had a psychology degree? Or am I good at HR because I've practiced it and I have a propensity to have empathy and bring goodness out of people? I think it's hard to say. I don't think it's because I went to school.
That's fair. I want to talk about side hustle. I started this with the intention of, does it improve the world? It does. People who will listen to this conversation will take something away. But this is my side hustle. Other people are doing stuff, they're making money off this. So, from an HR perspective, from a thought leader perspective, what's your take on people having side hustles?
I think initially, or years ago, it was thought that if someone was doing something else, immediately red flags for conflict of interest came up, which it's not always the case. But the biggest worry was, are they doing their business work during their 9 to 5? And is that affecting their work here? But that's because work was only done from 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, more realistically, or 8 to 9, 7 to 9. And that's changed. The the amount of workplaces that now rely on work output over working 9 to 5 is completely different. Um, like I know that I can start at a different time each day that works best for my schedule, and I put in all the time that I need to. I highly believe that you need to have a workplace where you give as much as you get, so you have to make sure it's balanced. But like I can leave and pick up my daughter from school at 3 o'clock, and I block my calendar to make sure I go do that. I come back, I finish the work day. I don't finish the work day. I do more work, have dinner, and then sometimes go back on to finish the work day. Or I have a team in Vietnam, so sometimes I do evening meetings with them. And so people are designing these lives that are moving from one thing to the other constantly: work, personal, and sometimes it's even from work one, personal, work two, personal, passion one over here. There's just so many different things. And it's not completely evolved, because I've even had leaders who say, well, isn't that illegal? They can't have a side business. I'm like, well, if it's not a conflict, why not? Because as you mentioned, like you get a whole different set of skills. Just like when you become a parent and your time becomes a little more strained, if you have multiple passions that you want to make work, you become very efficient at being able to make it work. I'm not going to say that happens to everybody, because there's probably a lot of people that fail at it and learn a lot of hard lessons along the way. Either they get fired from their job for not being focused enough, or there's other things that happen, but there's people that can do it. And I think that sometimes it's out of necessity, because I hope that I believe that our industry pays well, but I know that's not the case for all roles, for all industries. Retail, for example, um, food services, that kind of thing. Sometimes, if it's an hourly type of position that you're working in, you may not be getting enough hours to pay for rent. It's just the amount of that food costs have gone up for a family of four, and even the changes from week to week. Like a block of cheese costs $10. It's just and then the next week it'll be 7, and then the next week it's 9. It's unpredictable, but and my daughters love cheese. That's why I know so much. But who doesn't? But then I also think it can feed a lot of passions. I think that now more than ever, our attention spans are very short, and we are moving from one thing to the other, and we can channel it from things like spending mindless time on social media, which I still do too, but you can focus it into other areas. I love HR, but I also love being creative, and so I have a 3D printing business on the side. It's not huge. um, it started in the pandemic. I bought my partner a 3D printer, and I was on maternity leave, and I thought, 2020, the new year's coming up. I'm like, it was a really shitty year. And so I created these handbags that said fuck 2020. And I sold over 500 of them. And I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be something. And then this past Christmas, I 3D printed simple name tags for people to add onto their Christmas gifts, which is a great opportunity for people who can't find their name on anything. So I did some pretty unique names. Uh, I paid for all of Santa's gifts. I hope. Never mind. I'm never going to show my daughter the stock Santa's gifts for both of my children from doing this 3D side business. But it's also something that I love to do, and it gets at this different creative side of me. Um, and I just can't get enough of helping people. And so, being part of helping anybody. A lot of people reach out to me for help, which I do, but I started a women in automotive social hour that happens every 3 weeks or so. So that takes up my time on the side. So I think these side hustles can be just strictly financial requirements, or they can also be feeding passions that you maybe don't get out of your 9 to 5, but both are still equally important, and hopefully maybe a little bit financial on the side. Like you said, like eventually maybe you'll make money at it. So yeah, I think it's here to stay. The gig economy is huge. The and if you ask a woman from Hyundai, she's incredible. Her name's Ari, and she'll tell you that if you want to be a millionaire, you need at least 12 sources of income. And so she's the
That's a
first one to give
conversation I
something.
want to have.
Yeah. She's tried all different types of things and done some pretty incredible things. So depends on what your long-term goals are too.
Just to give it perspective, do you not think that right now, given the current economic uncertainty around us with so many layoffs, etc., personally I've seen that how you've just led the charge. I'm not going to get into the names of the companies, etc., but we've had a couple of colleagues who were subject to the economic uncertainty that we have. um, how Now everybody doesn't have access to you and your bunch of avengers, I would call them, right? But in general, so somebody listening in, what should they do to be better prepared for such a scenario right now, or how should they approach it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's it's a tough question to answer because I don't think there's a ton of options. I think though one thing you have to do is keep your resume up to date. The last thing you want to do if you're caught in a downsize or find yourself out of a job is that's going to take a lot of your mental energy right there. And you want your resume to already be, if not almost done and ready for kind of redistribution, then close to it. It also just makes sense. I have my resume open every other week because I'm like, I just learned and practiced a new skill. I've been working on a new project. Let's add it to the list because I'm not going to remember it um, a year from now.
Yeah.
And so, and I reminded myself quickly because I was trying to think of some of the things that I'd accomplished since starting here at my current role and since last April. And there were already things that I'm like, oh yeah, we did a lot of things. So keep your resume up to date as you go. And I know it's been hard over COVID. I myself am a very extroverted person, and um, introverted doesn't mean that you don't want to network and you don't want to see people. What it typically means, I don't want to speak for all people, but is that it just takes a lot more of your energy. And that's not taking into consideration people who have social anxiety and that different type of stuff. But I think that um, whatever your situation, you have to find out a way. And there's way more options to be able to connect with people nowadays, despite any of these challenges that someone may have, to continue and nourish your network. You've got to maintain it. You don't want to be reaching out to them for the first time in years asking for help with a job search. And you want to foster those relationships on an ongoing basis. It takes effort, it takes time. But if you can segment an hour a week, a couple hours a week, I'm going to spend half an hour on Monday evenings sending messages to 3 people I haven't chatted with in a while. And we've got LinkedIn. If you even forget who you could reach out and just look at who you're connected with, you'll find 3 people pretty quickly. And just have a conversation, ask how they're doing. And one of the other things I think that people need to do is, it's going to sound like a lot of work, but if you want to, you have to get better at messaging new people to build your network. So not only just fostering the existing network you have, but building on it. And there's a very clear difference between the people who will message me on LinkedIn that I'm going to respond to and the ones that I don't, because I get a ton of messages in there. A
I
lot of
can only
recruiters,
imagine.
yeah, a lot of recruiters coming, and they're not offering me awesome jobs. They want me to pay them to find people for my company. And we do our recruitment in house. And so I got to feed through a lot of different messages in there and try to make sure I'm not missing messages from people in my network that I do want to write back to. But historically, and I've had people who sent me messages that will just, I've never met them before, and they will say, "Can you get me a job?" And I'm like, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm going to have to write a whole response on why it's not just so easy to get you a job. And I got to try to protect my own time limits and spend time with my family. And I could spend all time writing responses to those people. So I don't. But the people who I do respond to will craft a message that's specifically for me. You know very clearly that it's not copied and pasted from somebody else. Because I have also received messages that will say, Dear Sean. I'm like, well, that's not my name. And I'm like, I know you're
That's
working
it.
at Kia. I'm like, no, I'm not. You know, they copied and pasted it. And I know it takes work to, and you can't always get it perfect, but you also got to consider the receiving end of that. Like, well, that kind of makes me upset that, you don't even know who you're talking to. Um, but I've hired most of them newcomers to Canada. I hired a couple women at Hyundai after they reached out to me on LinkedIn. We ended up having a coffee in person or having a virtual meeting. And not because we had a particular role open at that time, but eventually we had a role open and we were able to fill it with them. But they crafted a message that was specifically for me. They told me who they were and why they were interested in getting to know me, and just wanted to reach out to ask some questions. And so I responded, and you have to be, I think you need to work at, and if you're not good at it, ask GTP chat. They'll write
I was
they'll
just
write a good
gonna
email.
say that.
And that's a joke, half a joke, because it will work. But talk to people who you know are really good at writing, and use Grammarly, and take your time and keep track. It takes work, but it will pay off if you put the effort into it.
No, and
Oh, another one.
go. Yeah.
I didn't even know about this till last year. Have you heard of Jobalytics?
No.
So it's a Chrome extension,
Okay.
and so when you are applying for jobs using Chrome and you have this extension activated and you upload your resume to it, when you have a job posting open and you activate it, it will scan your resume, compare it to the job posting you're looking at, and give you a percentage of the job match. Which is not to say that, oh, if it's not a good match, don't apply for it, because you're likely looking at jobs you think you're capable of doing. But what it will do, it will help you make sure that you're filling any gaps that you may not have on your resume of experience that you have. You just haven't highlighted properly enough. And so that, I think, is a very key tool that people should be using. Just referring back to the resumes, I hate, that's a strong word, I do not like functional resumes. So where you write out all your experiences at the beginning that have categories, and apologies if this is on your resume, but I don't like it. I prefer, as a recruiter, a chronological experience. I want to see your experience chronologically. It should be still very easy. You can make it very easy to read. You don't need a long objective section. You can highlight your skills that match the role in a very clear section. You can highlight your experiences, add in metrics where you can. If you say that you increase sales, how much did you increase sales? And it doesn't have to be a dollar amount. It could be a percentage amount, because that's usually more indicative of the actual, depending on the size of the company.
And you're not giving sensitive information away.
Yeah, exactly. And so you should also add in some accomplishments in there rather than just tasks. You don't have to try to stress about fitting it on one page. I don't care if a resume has 5 pages in it, if it's all relevant information and it's clearly laid out and organized, and it tells me what I need to know, especially if I'm looking for a more senior experience position, or a senior level position. And if you don't have enough description in your experiences, and this happened to me looking at these 225 resumes over this past week, I could tell some people were trying to fit it on a page. They'd have 2 lines to describe their job where they spent 3 years. I'm like, it's not enough. On to the next one, because I'm not going to email you back and ask you for more details. Recruiters don't have that kind of time. That's not part of the typical processes. So you're going to get passed over quickly. And I think that if you have the means, and I know this, not everybody will, you can consider getting a professional review of your resume. I'll send you the link to this gentleman afterward. His name is Adam Karpiak. He's American based. He posts hilarious recruitment content on LinkedIn. I think you'll love it. But he has a consulting company that does different types and different levels of review, for all different levels of budget that you may be able to afford. And you can do that ahead and have it ready.
That's some powerful insight. I mean, I've listened to every word that you've said, and this is amazing. And some common mistakes that people are making and candidates are making during the hiring process, you touched upon, like, making it personal, not straight away going and asking for jobs, etc., but just making sure that you're describing your role properly within the company, sticking to percentages, showing that kind of impact that you've made. But any other things that particularly stand out which people can work upon?
Yeah, I think I'll reiterate too, like if you know some of the brands or companies that you want to work for, especially if you're in our industry, you probably know people that work there or know people that work there. So you have a ton of opportunity to try to connect and learn just more about the place in general. Because one, you may find something that you actually didn't know and maybe don't want to work there anymore, or it will reiterate the fact that you do want to work there, and you'll have met some connections, and that's just beneficial. But also, like generally, if you're applying for a company, and I'm saying these because I've actually had these things happen with people. Like look up the company and do a little research, like even just to know the basics. Automotive is pretty straightforward. Most people know the brands. If you're in it, you're probably also interested in the brands. But now working for an auto tech company, and I've been very fortunate that most people are very excited about our brand and our product, even though we're still very small and growing. But there's the few that are like, oh, yeah, like, yeah, what do you do? Or when I was at Kia, people were like, oh, yeah, you're calling from IKEA? And I'm like, no, did you even apply to IKEA? Like, you applied to Kia. Like, so this conversation is not going to go very well. We also had it happen at Hyundai. People, so I remember a colleague was having a conversation with someone who thought the entire time they were talking to Honda. So maybe clarify at the beginning. But anyway, look up the company, do some research. If you know nothing about it, then other candidates are going to stand out above you very easily. Um, Always ask questions in an interview. If you come to the end of the interview and you think questions have been answered, come up with new ones, and you can prepare a whole bunch ahead of time. You can ask the interviewers why they decided to work there and what keeps them engaged to stay there. Ask them what they expect the role to accomplish within the first 90 days, 6 months, 12 months. Ask them what challenges the person that fills this role might come up against in the first 6 months in this role. There are, and if you just Google questions to ask in an interview, 100 will come up. Ask ChatGPT. You
Absolutely.
know what? That's what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to see what questions it suggests to ask in an interview. Um, I I don't want to say to just make stuff up for the sake of making it up, but there's a very clear difference between the candidates at the end of an interview when you ask them if they have any questions and they're like, nope. And you're like, okay, there's nothing else you're interested in, like nothing, because there's no way you can cover everything in an hour interview. It's impossible. I'm like, there's nothing else you're curious about. So if nothing else, then just to show your curiosity and your interest, ask questions. And I mentioned before, like building those bridges, and maintain bridges, because I'm boggled by the people who, and maybe they don't even realize some of their actions and what they've done, have broken bridges while still working at a company or when they're leaving. But from an HR perspective, I think that onboarding a team member, I won't equate it exactly because there's different things that you're going to benefit from someone being at the company versus not being at the company. But the experience that employee has coming is just as important as them going, because they will continue to be an advocate and a champion once they're not at your company, and still talk good about your employer brand. And but the people that have burned bridges, like I was when I left Hyundai, um, they said they were going to invite me to the holiday party. And I wasn't sure that that was going to actually happen because it was months later. And in November, I was invited to their holiday party, and we made a band with the president and one of the dealer principals and a few of the employees. And we sang on stage at their holiday party. And I didn't even work there anymore.
Wow.
So there's a lot of power in maintaining bridges and being a good person, it can really pay off.
That's powerful. um, Specific to immigrants, and I ask this because there's going to be a huge inflow that we are expecting over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And what's also started happening is, and this is something that I have noticed since I've moved to Canada, we have a lot of working professionals who are now also migrating for a better quality of life and in general trying something out. So the perception there is also changing. They're coming with good education, good experience. But from a soft skills perspective, is there anything uh, that you'd recommend, guide, or advise immigrants that they should specifically work upon when they're networking, job hunting in Canada?
The one tough one, and I don't want to mention it, but it's going to be language.
Hmm.
But I think the actual onus is on employers, and this comes back to diversity and inclusion and that unlearning and relearning. The onus should be on employers to understand and recognize the skill that it takes for someone to speak in a language that's not native. That's a skill in and of itself that they likely don't even have if they only speak one language. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. But what I would suggest is, um, although I think a lot of countries teach English in a lot of schools, so a lot of
Yeah.
people come here with very strong language skills, but just practice. The more you practice, the easier it will get because you want to make sure that you're able to portray, especially in interviews or in initial conversations. You want to be able to demonstrate your skills, your ability, and your passion, your hardworkingness. Is that a word? Workingness, in a conversation, and you don't want that to hold you back. Because first impressions are usually very short. People will make decisions very quickly. So practicing and utilize all the technology that's out there. Grammarly is a great one if you're for writing, so that you can make sure that your messages are strong and clear. I think the best thing that people can do to uncover what to work on is getting others' input. The good thing about our industry and these groups that are being created, this group we have is Vishnu and Catherine, you will make connections. You will find other people who are also newcomers who have maybe paved the path 3 years ahead of you,
Yeah.
and you can get a lot of advice, especially from people who have gone through the same experiences as you, and what they've done to overcome them or what they have done to do differently. But it also gives them an opportunity to ask, especially what an HR person is going to need versus a marketing person versus a customer experience person, is all very different. And you can get a firsthand look into what do you think it takes to be successful at your job? Am I good at those things? I'm not. Okay, I'm going to go take a Udemy course for $12 that's going to enhance my skill. And I'm going to be able to talk to what I learned and what I've been practicing since taking this course if I get interviewed on it. So there's lots of different opportunities to do that. When you come to Canada too, so Job Skills Canada in a lot of colleges, universities, some of this, I don't know all of the vast majority of these that are available, but specifically with HR, when a newcomer with HR experience comes to Canada, there are transition programs for them to take an accelerated course to get up to speed quickly on Canadian HR practices and law. And so, and that started a few years ago. So I can only imagine that that has expanded to, like, there's so many courses available, certificates available, short training programs that are available that can help you get up to speed in the market that you move to. I mentioned before, if you can do it in markets that are huger than here, you can likely do it here. It's huger elsewhere, but sorry, you can do it here. You can find those, do them. You can, yeah, you leverage YouTube, Udemy, all these online courses that always have these huge sales that are like the $300 course is on sale for $9.99. I'm like, is it on sale or is that just always the price and you're making me feel like I'm getting a better value? Because they're always on sale. There's so many ways to do that. Find networking groups that discuss these topics, that meet about digital marketing or how ChatGTP is changing marketing. Like there's got to be those things available, and you'll find them, and go do them.
Chat GPT, we keep coming back to it. There's so many things that it can pointedly tell you that these are the things that you can do. But also YouTube, I believe, and these podcasts are huge. So technically, I have learned everything about podcasting through YouTube.
Yeah. Yep.
And I've just followed podcasters. And what they've done is that they have videos of how to shoot, what is the light setup, how you can connect your camera, this and that, what mic to buy, what equipment to buy. But they can't. They also tell you tips and tricks how to what do you need to do in terms of getting guests and stuff. So everything is available. I think it's only
Yeah.
about being intentional.
Yes. Yeah. If you want it, if you want to learn it, you will find it out there. YouTube is like everything. I need to figure out how to do something on my washing machine. YouTube. I want
Yep.
to learn how to tile my backsplash. YouTube. I want to learn interview skills. YouTube. Like so much content.
Perfect. I have two more questions, and I know that I've kept you for way longer than what we'd planned.
It
But
feels like
this
it's
is
we just started. I could talk forever.
I know. You know what? There's so many series I can do of this conversation with you, and I'm taking it for granted that we are going to be doing a lot. You'll be appearing a lot on this podcast. There is so much to unpack and learn.
So good. That's okay. I'll share them all. Get my name out there.
Perfect. Perfect. So, I was wondering if you could also provide some insights on the significance of having all the qualifications listed in the job description, because many a times what happens is that if there are 10 skills written and there are three probably which you do not have, you're only focused about those three, and you take it to the interview process as well, and somewhere go and muck it up if you're anything like me. So, how can you make sure that? I mean, what's the secret sauce there? That do you
I
need to
think
have all the skills?
that's another thing that's a combination of workplaces becoming more progressive and then behavior of applicants. We know for sure that women do that more often. They Men will apply to a job generally if they have 90% of the qualifications. Women, if they don't have 100%, are much less likely to apply at all. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And so I've seen it in a lot of other job postings. I do it in my own. I can't remember exactly how it's worded, but it's like, do you have most of what's listed here? Then we want to hear from you. We specifically call out that you do not have to have all these things in order to have it. That doesn't mean it's for every single role. I'm hiring for a marketing role right now that has very specific requirements in order to help our business be successful. So that may not be a good case, but generally, I put that on all my job postings, and I'm seeing it on a lot of other companies. I think that one, it's important from an employer standpoint that you write good job descriptions. There are so many companies that half-ass it, or without even applicants knowing, and it happens all the time, they post the job and then they realize, oh, maybe the role needs to actually be a little bit like this and not that, and they don't update the job description, or things change, or it just happens. So then you get to an interview and you're like, well, one, you didn't even say that on the job posting, and you're asking me a question about it. I'm sure people have experienced that. But I think that if an applicant, you just need to give it a shot. You have nothing to lose from applying for a job, other than if you get anxiety over getting turned down, get comfortable being uncomfortable, because job searching is challenging. It's very competitive, and you will get a lot of those. But every interview experience, or even just application experience, is exactly that. You're gathering experiences that will help you in the future. And so you can't always control that, but just be your authentic self. Talk about all of your strengths. Answer the questions the best that you can, and you're either a fit or you're not. And if you're not, um, then but you still did really well and you made really great connections. When they have another role open that does match for you, they're likely going to call you back.
Perfect. Now, I think we can close the circle on this. The final question would be that somebody has done and taken your tips and followed them to the T, and they have the offer. Now, is there any tips and tricks to how to approach salary negotiation with confidence and effectively? communicate a candidate's value to the company?
I think the number one thing you need to know for sure when you get an offer is what, even before you actually apply or even at the beginning, I like to have salary conversations in my first interaction with a candidate because I want to be sure that we're aligned. So we're not wasting anybody's time, especially theirs. It still doesn't always work out at the end because sometimes someone will say one thing and then all of a sudden, well, my friend said that I should be making this. So can you give me this? And I'm like, no, I told you I can't afford this. But, and that's not our salary range. I think your motivation for getting a job, you have to be very clear on it to yourself. Do I need this job to pay the bills? And I wouldn't say the word desperate, but is this a dire situation where I need a job? Am I going to be more flexible because of that? Can I afford to be more flexible because it's not dire? This is, maybe you're in a situation that you've been um, in a situation where you can't leave a job, and you're probably going to be very picky for the one that you're going to get because you want to be passionate about it and work with great people. So, like, you got to make sure that you are clear on what you're looking for. What's your current situation? I've been in situations throughout my career. At the beginning, I was married previously and I went through a divorce. And so there were years there where I just had to pay the bills. And that came before finding a job I was extremely passionate about. I still had great experiences, but the priorities shift over time. So you need to get that in line when you're job searching. When the offer comes in, I think it's very important that you get reliable data, and there's so many ways to get good data. There are a ton of free salary surveys out there. I have a Google Doc with a list, not made by me, but shared with me, of at least 20 different free ones. You can reach out to your contacts, reach out to people who, and stop being afraid to talk about salary. Ask your friends what they make. Maybe they won't want to share, and don't push too hard if that's their situation, but ask people what they make. Gather that data, because you could do a quick Google search, and if you look at the number that first pops up in the very first search, it could be right, it could not be right. You need to gather it from multiple sources, so then when you are negotiating, you can be very confident that with my years of experience, what I'm bringing to the table, this is what I think I'm worth. So if they come in this range, I will accept it. I always prefer when someone's open with me about that, but not everybody is. I try to open the transparency from my side first as the employer, which will hopefully be reciprocated from the other side, and it usually is, so we can have really honest conversations. But if it's not, then at least know in your head exactly what you want, and be honest with them about it. And if they come in under what you expect, just tell them that based on my research and data, and if you feel confident in the reliability of it and you've gathered from multiple sources, and maybe gone to your HR friends that may be able to help, then be confident in asking. The worst they could say is no. When I got offered the job at Hyundai, I was really confident in um, I really wanted to get back into auto because it's special. And I was out of auto at the time. I'm like, I really want to get back. It's going to be my first manager experience. I still asked for more money, even though they came in with a really decent offer. I knew what the research was out there, like what the data was out there, and it's a wide range. And I thought, you know what, it can't hurt. And I don't think I was penalized because of it. They still said no, and I still accepted, but I asked for it. But just be wary, it's not likely that a company is going to take back an entire offer, especially with today's market and how hard it can be to find great talent, because people have a lot of options. Um, they're not going to take the offer back because you ask for more money. They may say no, and you may say okay, but you could also ask for potential other options. Like if vacation is very important to you, and is their ability to negotiate more. Um, and you have to find out from them, like, where you can ask them straight up, like, are there some other areas that we're able to negotiate in? Can I get benefits from day one instead of waiting until 3 months? is there room to negotiate on an RRSP matching plan? Not every company will allow it, but maybe some will, especially depending on the level that you're joining the organization with. So there's lots of ways to negotiate and get what you want, or at least be happy with what you accept. Because there's nothing worse than taking something that you don't feel is representative of what you deserve, and then it's going to eat at you when you work there.
Yeah. Uh, Great advice. So much of wisdom, so much of knowledge, so much information. Thank you so much,
You're welcome.
Lydia. I mean, we said that we'll do it for an hour. It's been 2 hours, 30 minutes, and I'm not even counting the initial conversation that we had. Oh
And
my God.
it's all good stuff. And but you know what? And you'll some of these questions you would ask the next HR person, and they might give you a slightly different answer. So, you know, I think what one of the biggest things I've learned in growing up, I guess, as you would say, especially when you kind of transition from that point of like you think your parents know everything and then you realize they don't. And now you have to piece the world together yourself. But you crowdsource and you take pieces of everybody's feedback and information and advice, you combine it with all the other advice you got, and then you get to make your own conclusions, which is also a great thing about being an adult. You can make your own decisions. But hopefully, my perspective will add to someone's collective experiences.
It definitely will, and that's the hope. That's the goal with this podcast. So, thank you very much for your
Thank
time
you for
again.
having me.
It's
It was
been
awesome.